The massive Galactic Confederacy ship named Eternal Light hung in space above Earth like a silver disk catching the sun's rays. Ambassador Zilith stood at the wide viewing window, all four of his yellow eyes fixed on the blue planet below. His scaled skin, normally a calm green color, had started to darken with emotion. "Sir, the report you asked for is ready," said Morax, his young assistant, holding out a thin tablet. Zilith took the device and began to read. His tail, normally still, began to twitch as he moved through the information. By the time he finished, his scales had turned a deep emerald, a sign of intense anger among his species. "Is this confirmed?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Morax nodded. "Yes, Ambassador. Our scouts have verified it with multiple sources." Zilith read aloud from the report. "Approximately 37,000 human juveniles are currently being held in locked facilities across their United States region. These juvenile detention centers restrict movement, limit educational access, and use isolation as punishment." The ambassador slammed the tablet down on the table, making Morax jump. "This is an outrage. In all my years representing the Confederacy, I have never seen such barbaric treatment of young ones." Zilith paced the room, his claws clicking against the metal floor. "Every developed civilization in the galaxy recognizes that developing minds require freedom, stimulation, and positive guidance. The humans claim these facilities are for rehabilitation," Morax offered hesitantly. "Rehabilitation." Zilith's breathing vents flared wide. "Locking children away does not rehabilitate. It damages their neural pathways during critical development phases." The ship's commander, a tall blue-skinned being named Vrel, entered the room and gave the traditional chest-tap greeting. "Ambassador, we've received a transmission from Earth's United Nations. They're requesting an explanation for our scanning of their juvenile facilities." Zilith's eyes narrowed. "Good. Prepare my shuttle. I will speak to their leaders directly." "Sir," said Vrel carefully, "perhaps we should consider diplomatic channels. Earth is very new to the Confederacy. They may not understand." "That is precisely why I must go," interrupted Zilith. "This cannot wait for formal protocols. Their young ones are suffering now." Within hours, Zilith's personal shuttle was cutting through Earth's atmosphere, headed for the United Nations headquarters in New York. The human media was already calling it an unexpected diplomatic crisis, though they had no idea what had triggered the ambassador's sudden visit. Inside the shuttle, Zilith reviewed the Galactic Convention on Sentient Rights, focusing on Section 42, which specifically addressed the treatment of juvenile beings. According to these universally accepted principles, what Earth was doing violated at least 16 different statutes. "This will impact their provisional membership status," he muttered to himself as the shuttle began its landing sequence. On the ground, a hastily assembled welcome party waited nervously. None of them knew that their normal practices, things they had taken for granted for decades, were about to be labeled as barbaric by galactic standards. As Zilith stepped from his shuttle onto Earth soil, his translator device captured his first words to the waiting human officials. "Take me to your leaders immediately. We need to discuss your imprisonment of children, a practice so shocking that it has sent ripples of outrage throughout the Confederacy. This must end." The humans exchanged worried glances. First contact had occurred only months ago, and Earth was still adjusting to being part of a larger galactic community. They were about to learn that membership came with expectations, and that the way they treated their youngest citizens would be their first major test. The emergency meeting room at the United Nations headquarters buzzed with tension. Ambassador Zilith sat at one end of the long table, his scaled skin still dark with anger. Across from him sat 5 nervous humans: the U.S. Secretary of State Ryan Miller, Attorney General Susan Porter, the UN Secretary General, and 2 aides frantically taking notes. "Let me be clear," Zilith said, his translator converting his clicks and hisses into calm English. "The Confederacy finds your treatment of juvenile humans deeply troubling." Ryan Miller cleared his throat. "Ambassador, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Our juvenile justice system serves an important purpose in our society. Purpose. Xylith's auxiliary breathing vents flared. What purpose does locking away developing minds serve? Susan Porter slid a folder across the table. These facilities house young people who have broken our laws. They provide structure, education, and rehabilitation. Xylith didn't touch the folder. Instead, he placed a small silver disc on the table. It projected a hologram showing children in orange jumpsuits, some sitting alone in small rooms, others walking in lines with their hands behind their backs. "Is this your idea of education and rehabilitation?" he asked quietly. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Those images are selective. Many of these young people have committed serious crimes, theft, assault, even murder in some cases." "I have reviewed your crime statistics," Xylith replied. 90% of these serious offenders are guilty of nonviolent acts. Even for those who committed violence, isolation is counterproductive to behavioral development. The UN Secretary General spoke up. "Ambassador, Earth hasn't been part of the Confederacy long enough to adapt all our systems to your standards." "This is not about Confederacy standards," Xylith said firmly. "This is about universal principles of sentient development. Every species with an advanced civilization has discovered the same truth. Confining developing minds causes lasting neural damage." Susan Porter frowned. "With all due respect, human brains may not work the same way as other species." At this, Xylith actually laughed, a strange bubbling sound. "We have studied over 8,000 intelligent species. The patterns of juvenile neural development are remarkably consistent. Your own human scientists have confirmed this in studies your government ignores." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the New York skyline. "The Galactic Confederacy welcomed Earth because we saw potential in your species, your creativity, your resilience. But how you treat your most vulnerable members speaks volumes about your true values." Ryan Miller's face reddened. "Ambassador, the United States is a sovereign nation. We decide our own laws." "Of course," Xylith nodded. "And the Confederacy decides its trade partners, technology sharing, and membership benefits." The threat hung in the air. Earth's economy had already begun to transform with access to Confederacy markets. Losing that would be devastating. "What exactly are you asking?" the Secretary General asked cautiously. Xylith returned to the table. "A full inspection of your juvenile facilities by our developmental specialists, and immediate implementation of changes they recommend." "That's impossible," Susan Porter protested. "We have state laws, federal regulations, decades of established policy. Yet you changed centuries of energy policy in months when given access to our clean fusion technology," Xylith observed. "Priorities reveal themselves through action, not words." He tapped the silver disc, and the hologram changed to show alien facilities where young beings learned in open spaces filled with technology, guided by adults who never raised their voices. This is how the Voldraxian species, once known as the most violent in the galaxy, transformed their society in a single generation, by nurturing their young instead of punishing them. Ryan Miller stared at the images. "Even if we wanted to make changes, our citizens might not accept alien interference in our justice system." "Then perhaps," Xylith said softly, "they should see for themselves what we're talking about." He pressed another button on the disc. "I'm transmitting these images to all Earth media channels now. Let your people decide if locking children away is truly justice." As phones began buzzing around the table with incoming messages, the humans realized the diplomatic incident had just become a global controversy. 3 weeks before the diplomatic crisis began, Ethan Warren sat on his thin mattress in Cell Block D of Pinewood Juvenile Detention Center. The concrete walls of his small room were bare except for a calendar where he marked off each day of his 8-month sentence. "Only 4 more months," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his messy brown hair. At 16, Ethan didn't look like anyone's idea of a criminal. Skinny, with glasses too big for his face, He had been sent to Pinewood for what he still considered just a prank, hacking into the school's computer system to change grades for himself and 3 friends. The morning buzzer sounded, and Ethan joined the line of boys heading to breakfast. As they shuffled down the hallway in their identical orange jumpsuits, he noticed something strange. The guards were huddled around a small TV, completely ignoring the teenagers. "What's going on?" Ethan whispered to Joe Garcia, who had the cell next to his. Joe shrugged. "No idea, but they've been glued to that TV since dawn." In the cafeteria, even the kitchen staff seemed distracted, accidentally serving larger portions as they kept looking up at the screens mounted in the corners. Ethan squinted to see the images, strange silver ships hovering above major cities. The headline scrolling across the bottom read, "First CONTACT. Alien civilization makes PC fuel a PROH." "Holy crap," breathed Joe. "It's actually happening." For the next week, Pinewood operated in a state of stunned distraction. Classes were canceled as teachers and students alike remained fixed on news coverage. The beings from the ships called themselves the Galactic Confederacy, a collection of over 300 intelligent species who had been observing Earth for decades. "They look like lizard people with 4 eyes, said Carlos, another boy in Ethan's block, as they watched the footage of the first alien delegation meeting with world leaders. "That's just the Vesteri species," explained Tyler, the resident sci-fi expert. "They showed others on the news yesterday. Some look almost human, and some don't look like anything we've ever seen." By the second week, a new normal had settled in. Classes resumed, though all anyone talked about was the aliens. Guards swapped wild theories during shift changes. Some thought the aliens would solve all Earth's problems with advanced technology. Others feared they had come to take over. Then came the morning when Director Hayes entered the cafeteria, looking unusually nervous. "Attention, everyone," she announced, tapping a spoon against a tray. "I have important news. Tomorrow, we will be receiving visitors from the Galactic Confederacy. They are conducting what they call a welfare inspection of various human institutions, including this facility." A stunned silence fell over the room, followed by an explosion of excited chatter. "Why would aliens care about juvie?" asked Joe. Ethan had no answer, but a strange feeling of hope stirred inside him. The next day, the boys were ordered to clean everything. They scrubbed floors, polished windows, and made their beds with military precision. At exactly noon, a small silver shuttle landed in the yard. From it emerged 3 beings, a tall blue-skinned creature with 6 arms, a shorter being covered in soft fur, and one of the 4-eyed lizard people Ethan had seen on TV. Director Hayes greeted them with a forced smile. "Welcome to Pinewood Juvenile Rehabilitation Center. I'm Director Patricia Hayes." The blue being spoke, its voice coming through a small device at its throat. "I am Calyx, Child Development Specialist for the Confederacy. These are my colleagues, Nex and Trill. We are here to observe how you care for your young ones." As the strange procession moved through the facility, Ethan and the others tried to catch glimpses from doorways and around corners. During recreation hour, Calyx entered the common room where 20 boys were gathered. The alien approached Ethan directly, compound eyes reflecting the fluorescent lights. "Human child," Calyx said, "why are you here against your will?" Ethan froze, feeling every eye in the room on him. No adult had ever asked him that question with such genuine interest. "I changed some grades in the school computer," he finally answered. Calyx's head tilted. "And for this information adjustment, they removed you from society." "Yes, Mom. Or Sir. Or whatever the right term is." The alien made a sound like gentle bells. A laugh, Ethan realized. "And what are you learning from this experience?" Calyx asked. Before Ethan could answer, Director Hayes stepped forward. "Let's continue the tour, shall we?" But as Calyx was led away, the alien looked back at Ethan with an expression he couldn't read but somehow understood. Something was about to change. "This is completely unacceptable," declared Calyx, her blue skin darkening to a deep indigo as she measured the dimensions of Ethan's cell with a glowing device. 8 by 10 feet for a developing adolescent. The Confederacy would not confine animals to such a space. Director Patricia Hayes maintained her professional smile, though beads of sweat had formed on her forehead. We call them rooms, not cells, and they meet all federal guidelines for juvenile housing. Calyx's 6 limbs moved in a complex pattern that her translator didn't interpret, clearly a gesture of frustration. Show me these federal guidelines. I would like to compare them to the galactic standards for developing sentience. The inspection had been underway for 3 hours. Every staff member at Pinewood was on edge as the 3 aliens methodically documented everything with their strange devices. Nothing escaped their notice. Not the quality of the food, the hardness of the mattresses, or the limited recreational equipment. "What is this room used for?" asked Trill, the furry alien, pointing to a door at the end of the hallway. Director Hayes hesitated. "That's our behavioral management unit." "Open it," Trill requested. Inside were 5 small rooms with nothing but a bed bolted to the floor. No windows, no books, nothing but blank walls. "Solitary confinement," whispered Nex, the reptilian alien, 4 eyes widening in shock. "You isolate developing minds." The translator conveyed the words, but couldn't capture the horror in the alien's voice. "Only in extreme cases," Hayes explained quickly. "When a resident poses a danger to themselves or others." Calyx touched the wall of one room, her hand trembling slightly. "How long do you keep them here?" "The law allows up to 15 days, but we rarely." 15 days. Calyx's blue skin flushed purple, a reaction the humans now recognized as extreme distress. Director Hayes, in the Andromeda Galaxy, placing a juvenile in isolation for even 1 day is classified as torture. The aliens huddled together, speaking in their own languages, clicks and whistles, and soft purring sounds. When they turned back, Nex stepped forward. "We would like to speak with the juveniles, without supervision." "That's against protocol," Hayes objected. "These are minors under state custody, and we are representatives of the Galactic Confederacy," Nex replied calmly. "Your government has signed preliminary membership agreements that include inspection rights." Hayes reluctantly agreed, and the aliens met with groups of teenagers in the cafeteria. The staff watched anxiously from a distance as the young inmates opened up to the visitors. "They make us walk with our hands behind our backs," explained Carlos to Calyx. "If we talk during meals, we lose points." "What happens when you lose points?" asked Trill. "No phone calls home, no recreation, more time in your room," answered Joe. Ethan, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "The worst part is how boring it is. We're not allowed to have real books, just these approved textbooks that are years out of date. No internet, nothing to keep our minds busy." Calyx's expression softened. In Confederacy education centers, young minds receive constant stimulation. Learning systems adapted to individual interests and abilities. "That sounds amazing," Ethan said wistfully. Later, in the administration office, the inspection team delivered their preliminary findings to Director Hayes and 2 officials from the State Juvenile Justice Department. "We have documented 178 violations of galactic standards for the treatment of developing sentience," Calyx announced, displaying a holographic report. "The most serious concerns are the use of isolation, inadequate mental stimulation, restricted physical activity, and punishment-based behavioral systems." "With all due respect," said one of the state officials, "Earth isn't bound by galactic standards. We have our own laws." "True," agreed Nex. "But if Earth wishes to continue its provisional membership in the Confederacy, with all the benefits that entails, certain fundamental practices must align with universal principles." "Are you threatening us?" asked Hayes, her professional demeanor finally cracking. "Not at all," Calyx replied. "We are offering you an opportunity to evolve, just as every other species in the Confederacy has done. As the aliens prepared to leave, Ethan watched from a window as they boarded their shuttle. For the first time since arriving at Pinewood, he felt something new stirring in his chest. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The universe had suddenly become much bigger, and perhaps in that vastness, there was room for second chances. "What do you think will happen?" Joe asked, standing beside him. Ethan shrugged. "I don't know, but I bet things won't stay the same." The silver shuttle rose silently into the sky, carrying away the most unusual inspectors Pinewood had ever seen, and a detailed report that would soon shake the foundations of Earth's juvenile justice system. President Alan Foster sat behind his desk in the Oval Office, trying to appear calm despite the unusual situation. Across from him, a 7-foot-tall hologram of Grand Counselor Vreth shimmered in blue light. The alien leader's multiple eyes blinked at different rates as it waited for the president's response. "This report can't be correct," President Foster said, tapping the tablet on his desk. "Our juvenile justice system has been in place for decades. It's designed to rehabilitate young offenders. Yet your recidivism rates indicate otherwise," Vreth replied, his translator creating that deep, melodious voice. 64% of your detained juveniles return to your system within 3 years." The president glanced at his advisors, who stood nervously along the wall. The Secretary of State gave a small nod, confirming the figure. "The Confederacy High Council has reviewed the inspection findings and reached a decision," Vreth continued. "Earth's juvenile detention practices violate core principles of sentient rights. This places your provisional membership status at risk." The room grew tense. In the 6 months since first contact, Earth had already received incredible benefits from Confederacy membership: clean energy technology, advanced medical treatments, and trade opportunities that had boosted the global economy. Losing these would be devastating. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" the president asked carefully. "Completely dismantle our juvenile justice system overnight." "We understand transition requires time," Vreth acknowledged. "Therefore, we propose an alternative solution." The alien's hologram waved a limb, and a new image appeared beside it: a sleek building surrounded by gardens and recreation areas. "The Confederacy will establish a youth rehabilitation center using our developmental science. Any human family may voluntarily transfer their detained child to this program. After 1 year, we will compare outcomes." The president frowned. "You want to run your own juvenile facility on American soil. We propose international waters, 10 miles off your California coast," Vreth clarified, "on a platform similar to those used in the Proxima system for interspecies education centers." The National Security Advisor stepped forward. "Sir, this raises serious sovereignty concerns. We can't allow an alien power to take custody of American citizens." Vreth's multiple eyes blinked simultaneously. "Your concerns are noted. Perhaps you would prefer trade restrictions instead. Our economists estimate they would reduce Earth's economic growth by approximately 37% over the next 5 years. The president's face hardened. "That sounds like a threat, Counselor." "Merely a statement of consequence," Vreth replied calmly. "The Confederacy has principles it cannot compromise. Chief among them is the treatment of developing minds. Every member civilization has faced similar adjustments." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, the Secretary of State spoke up. "What if we start with a small pilot program? Maybe 50 volunteers. That would give us data without a major policy shift." The president considered this, then looked back at the alien hologram. "Would a limited trial program be acceptable to the Confederacy?" Vreth's body changed color slightly, a sign the humans had learned indicated satisfaction. "A reasonable compromise. If you allow families to choose freely, and if you permit independent monitoring." After 2 more hours of negotiation, the details were hammered out. The program would start with 50 juvenile offenders whose families volunteered them for transfer. The Confederacy would build a rehabilitation center with human medical staff allowed on site. After 1 year, an independent commission would evaluate the results. As the hologram flickered out, The president sank back in his chair. I hope we're not making the huge mistake. Sir, said the education secretary, who had been quiet until now. What if they're right? What if there is a better way to help these kids? The president had no answer. But 3 weeks later, when construction began on the floating platform 10 miles off San Diego, the world watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Would alien methods work on human children? Or was this the first step toward unwelcome interference in Earth's sovereignty? For the families of 50 detained teenagers, including Ethan Warren's parents, it represented something simpler. A chance for their children to come home changed for the better. Ethan Warren stood at the railing of the floating platform, watching dolphins play in the Pacific waves below. The ocean breeze ruffled his hair, which had grown out from the short cut required at Pinewood. He wore comfortable clothes, jeans, and a blue t-shirt instead of an orange jumpsuit. Still can't believe this place, said Joe Garcia, joining him at the railing. 6 weeks ago, we were stuck in cells. Now look at us. The Developmental Guidance Center, or Space School as the kids called it, looked nothing like a detention facility. The circular platform housed dome-shaped buildings surrounding a central garden. Transparent walls let in sunlight everywhere. Nothing was locked. No one wore uniforms. Morning check-in time, chirped a friendly voice from Ethan's wristband, a device that translated, provided information, and gently reminded rather than ordered. The boys made their way to the main dome, where 48 other teenagers were gathering. The original 50 selected for the program had arrived 1 month ago, traveling by boat to this strange new home in international waters. Calyx, the blue 6-armed alien who had inspected Pinewood, floated to the center of the room. Unlike human staff who walked, Calyx used a personal gravity device to hover slightly above the floor. "Good morning, young humans," she said warmly. "Today marks your first month at the center. Each of you will have your progress assessment." Instead of causing anxiety, this announcement brought excitement. Progress assessments weren't tests, but interactive sessions where each teen could see how their brain activity had changed. Ethan's session came after lunch. He sat in a comfortable chair while Trill, the furry alien specialist, placed a light mesh cap on his head. "This maps your neural pathways," Trill explained, even though Ethan had done this weekly. "It lets us adjust your learning program to match your development." A holographic display appeared, showing colorful patterns that represented Ethan's brain activity. Beside it, another image showed the scan from his arrival day. "Remarkable improvement," said Trill, pointing to bright connections in the frontal areas. "Your impulse control centers are much more active, and these areas associated with language processing have expanded significantly." "That's from the language lessons?" Ethan asked. "Yes, your aptitude for xenolinguistics, alien languages, is unusually high. You've already mastered basic Vesteri clicks." Later that afternoon, Dr. Neela Gupta, one of the human scientists working at the center, led a group session with all 50 teens. "What I want to understand," she said, "is how this environment feels different from your previous facilities." Hands shot up around the room. "We're not treated like criminals here," said a girl named Amy. "At my old place, guards watched everything I did, like they were just waiting for me to mess up." "The learning is different," added Carlos. "At Pinewood, we just memorized stuff from outdated books. Here, I'm building actual robots while learning physics." When Ethan's turn came, he thought carefully. "The biggest difference is that here, no one's punishing us for who we were. They're helping us become who we could be." Dr. Gupta noted his response with particular interest. 3 months into the program, visitors arrived. A congressional committee evaluating the pilot project. Ethan and 5 other teens were selected to speak with them. "This technology is incredible," said one congressman, looking around at the advanced learning systems. "But surely it only works because of alien equipment we couldn't possibly afford on Earth." "Actually, sir," Ethan replied respectfully, "Calyx says the most important changes aren't about technology. They're about approach. They don't use punishment or isolation at all." "But how do they maintain discipline?" asked a skeptical congresswoman. They help us understand consequences, Ethan explained. When I got angry and broke a terminal last month, they didn't lock me up. They had me repair it while learning about emotional regulation. After 6 months, the results were becoming clear. Test scores showed the pilot group advancing academically at twice the rate of their peers in traditional facilities. Behavioral incidents had decreased by 87%, and brain scans showed dramatic improvements in areas associated with decision-making and emotional control. The most surprising development came when Ethan discovered his natural talent for languages extended to programming translation software. Working with the alien technicians, he helped improve Earth Confederacy communication systems. The human adolescent brain isn't meant to be confined, Dr. Gupta explained to visiting educators. Its neural elasticity thrives on challenges, connection, and purpose. That's not alien science. That's human science we've ignored for too long. As month 7 began, Ethan looked at his reflection in his room's window. The angry, bored boy from Pinewood was gone. In his place stood someone with hope, and more importantly, with possibilities. 1 year after the arrival of the Galactic Confederacy ships, Earth was a changed planet. New technologies had transformed industries. First contact protocols had become routine. And most significantly, the way humans thought about their young had begun to shift. Ambassador Zillith stood on the stage at the United Nations General Assembly, his scales now a calm blue-green as he addressed the gathered world leaders. We do not suggest that humans abandon consequences for juvenile actions, he explained, his translator conveying his words in multiple languages simultaneously. We merely propose that those consequences align with developmental science. On the screens behind him, data from the year-long pilot program scrolled for all to see. The numbers were impossible to ignore. 0% recidivism among the 50 participants compared to the national average of 64%. Academic achievement levels 3 times higher than control groups. Medical scans showing healthier brain development patterns. In the audience, President Foster watched thoughtfully. The past year had been politically challenging. Conservative groups had protested against alien interference in American justice. Budget committees had balked at the cost of rebuilding juvenile facilities, yet public opinion had shifted dramatically after the first success stories emerged. Outside the UN building, reporters crowded around a small group of graduates from the Developmental Guidance Center. Now 18, Ethan Warren stood tall in a crisp blue suit, answering questions with confidence. The Confederacy approach taught me something important, he told the cameras. Punishment teaches you to avoid getting caught. True guidance teaches you to make better choices even when no one's watching. Back inside, Ambassador Zillith was concluding his address. The Confederacy is pleased to announce that Earth's provisional membership status has been upgraded to associate level, based on the reforms already implemented in 32 of your nations. Applause filled the chamber. In just 1 year, 17 countries had completely redesigned their juvenile justice systems. 15 more had begun the transition. Only a few holdouts remained. Later that evening, a special ceremony took place at the original Developmental Guidance Center off the California coast. All 50 graduates gathered with their families, alien mentors, and human staff to celebrate their completion of the program. Dr. Neela Gupta, now the lead human scientist for the project, addressed the crowd. What began as an alien intervention has become a human revolution. We've discovered that these methods work not because they're alien, but because they align with what we already knew about human development, knowledge we were ignoring. One by one, the graduates received certificates and personal messages from their mentors. When Ethan's turn came, calyx floated forward, all 6 arms extended in a gesture of pride. Ethan Warren has shown exceptional growth, she announced. His work on translation systems has improved communication between our species. His neural development has exceeded all projections, but most importantly, he has discovered his purpose. Ethan accepted the certificate, then surprised everyone by responding in calyx's native language, a series of clicks and whistles that made the alien's eyes widen with delight. Translated, he had said, "Thank you for seeing who I could become." The ceremony concluded with an announcement that the center would expand to accept 200 more participants, including some from countries still resistant to reform. As the sun set over the Pacific, Ethan joined his parents on the observation deck. His father, who had once been skeptical of the alien program, put an arm around his shoulders. "I hardly recognize you," he said, pride evident in his voice. "Not just how you look, but how you think, how you express yourself." "That's the point, Dad," Ethan replied. "I'm not the same person who hacked into the school computers. I'm who I was supposed to become." In the years that followed, Earth continued its integration into the galactic community. The juvenile guidance approach spread to educational systems, then to adult rehabilitation programs. Recidivism rates plummeted nationwide. Academic outcomes soared. And it had all begun with a simple alien observation. Locking up kids made no sense. Ethan Warren went on to become the first human specialist in interspecies communication, helping bridge the gap between Earth and its new galactic neighbors. When asked about his journey, he always gave the same answer. "Sometimes it takes seeing ourselves through alien eyes to recognize our most human potential."